Everybody, so as you know, I'm very excited about Kamala Harris and looking forward to voting for her in the fall. Well, it is the fall, voting for her in November. And as such, I've been listening to a lot more of the MSNBC side of the political discussion, mainly because that's where all of the positive vibes are coming from right now. And first and foremost, I prioritize my own personal joy and personal happiness. So that's what feels good, where the feel good vibes are coming from, and I'm very excited about that. Anyway, as I've been listening to more things from this side, I've noticed one glaring problem that needs to be addressed, and that is the way in which people on that side seem to refer to everything conservative as alt-right. So, before we get into that, I wanted to let everybody know that I have a Patreon that is active for the first time in many years. I am building up support. It's patreon.com/jordan42. I've not done any kind of professional YouTubing in a long time, but I'm doing this because uh, we like there's more than one person doing this channel, because I find myself in a bit of a sticky financial situation between the 2024 tax season and car repairs that I had to get done and dental work that I'm going to have to get done in January. I find myself needing to increase my income considerably, and so I'm appealing to this so that I can at least forestall having to get a third job, or God forbid quitting two jobs I enjoy to get some other job. So anyway, that's where I find myself, and also wanting to create a little bit more financial security so that I can, better navigate these kind of things when you get hit with a trifecta like that. So I don't have any aspirations of becoming a career bread tuber. I'd like to get to a more modest goal of about $800 to $1,000. If everyone who sees this video put in a couple bucks, I'd be at my funding goal immediately. We did our first round of backer funding for the month of August. I put up a cool guitar instrumental that I wrote. Every month I'm doing a different kind of art project or project video sort of thing that requires more production and more time, more investment of time and energy and talent than just sitting here and talking to my camera like I so often do. So if you would be willing to get on board with that, I would really appreciate it. And as my financial situation stabilizes, I will use that money to further grow the channel, get new equipment for video editing, and then my personal audio production studio, home studio and everything, get all of that stuff upgraded too, would be the next thing I would do with it. So anyway, thank you to all the people who have contributed so far, and I've got more cool stuff coming down the line. Anyway, so getting back to it, what got me thinking about this was last night. I've been listening to I listen to a lot of things, a lot of various perspectives, and it's not because I'm not one of these people that's like, I want to have an informed opinion and hear all points of view. No, it's more like I just feel this way about this issue and this way about this issue, and I just go to the people who will tell me what I want to hear because I already know I'm right. Anyway, so that's that's where I kind of find myself listening to a lot of different things. And there's this one channel, the Anti-Bot, which they're great at kind of deconstructing the points of view of like right-wing megachurch pastors and that kind of thing. And that's something I've struggled with even though I am a Christian and came back to Christianity as an adult. I've struggled with the influence that a lot of these people have, because I've kind of, in my own mind, kind of struggled with the idea of like, what if they're right? What if life is supposed to be, pain and misery, and I'm supposed to just, kind of impress everybody with how miserable I am and not pursue my own happiness and my own joy and satisfaction and all of that. And they are great at, they're both atheists, but they're great at kind of debunking the nonsense claims these people make, especially because they were both raised in very conservative forms of Christianity, and as such, they actually both have a very extensive and thorough biblical knowledge, where they can show that, when they go up there and challenge the points of view of these various people, they can say, well, actually, yeah, it says that, but then there's also this over here, and this, and this, and kind of break it down in points, rather than when you have someone like a Matt Dillahunty, who's basically, you watch like the debate he had with Jordan Peterson, and Jordan Peterson puts out this, amazing, illustrious, loquacious observation about belief and faith and spirituality and all that, and Matt Dillahunty's response basically boils down to, well, nah. And so they actually do good thought provoking, make thought provoking remarks. But as I was listening to him the other night, I was listening to him comment on someone that I've been aware of recently, who is Mark Driscoll. Mark Driscoll, if you don't know, is a very, very conservative mega church pastor who was fired from his original position, or at least asked to leave his original position after numerous reports of extremely abusive behavior from his staff. He has gone on to a new appointment at another fellowship, and all indications are that he's learned absolutely nothing. But anyway, so Mark Driscoll, to give you an idea of what these, how I appreciate what the Antibot does, there's been a lot of talk in Christian circles lately about the quote-unquote Jezebel spirit and women who have the Jezebel spirit, and they were very quick to explain that Jezebel does not actually have the qualities that Mark Driscoll is describing to her in the Bible. This is the idea of something called the Jezebel spirit is an invention of Mark Driscoll, and it's not actually from Christian scripture, and that helps me breathe a sigh of relief, because, I do struggle with things. I do believe in the priesthood of the believer, and that we all ought to interpret the Bible ourselves and figure out how to apply it to our lives. I think that's what you're supposed to do with the Bible. I do think that God wants people to have a plurality of interpretations, because different people will need to apply it different ways in their lives. But anyway, but it does help with that. It helps a lot. Anyway, so as I'm listening to this, I was watching this thing. I believe it was the one where they're talking about Mark Driscoll's bizarre Protestant or overzealous Protestant work ethic, and they described him as being alt-right, and that's where I have to slam on the brakes, because Mark Driscoll, despite being repulsive and an over-the-top vile human being by all accounts, and certainly in so much of his worldview, is not alt-right. And I have a problem with this. I'll articulate why this is an issue, an overarching issue, in a minute. But everything right-wing that has any prominence at all gets described as alt-right now. I have heard the Daily Wire described as being alt-right. They're not. In fact, one of the cornerstones of the alt-right ethos is anti-Semitism. Ben Shapiro, in the year of Trump's first election cycle, was the #1 target of alt-right anti-Semitism because of his opposition, initial at least opposition to Donald Trump. The Daily Wire is not alt-right. They're just garden variety GOP Republican conservatives. They may differ internally on certain policy matters. For example, I know Matt Walsh it has a very isolationist point of view that says the United States should not be getting involved in Israel-Palestine or in Russia-Ukraine, whereas Ben Shapiro is very much in favor of that. But those are disagreements within the larger rubric of what is really just basic republicanism, conservative republicanism, as it has existed since Nixon, basically. It's really even since before that, but what was codified as the GOP around the time of Richard Nixon. Their points of view, all things considered, are not that extreme. And I know as I say that, you're going to gasp and say, but what about, whatever you're about to say is actually not that extreme, especially when you compare it with what the alt-right actually believes, and this goes for Mark Driscoll as well. The alt-right refers to a very specific set of ideas and agenda items and advocates and public advocates for those agenda items. It's a very specific worldview and a very specific philosophy. It was the term was coined by Richard Spencer when he launched his website Alternative Right in 2010. The website espoused a point of view that was based around a number of things, including European ethno-nationalism and various positions on anti-Semitism and an overwhelming return to traditionalism and monarchist forms of government, and a complete eschewing of the American form of government, and indeed modern democratic forms of government in general. And yes, that includes the constitutional republic concept that so many conservatives kick around. The reason they say they want a constitutional republic, or they think we live in a constitutional republic, do not come in and start telling me why we live in a constitutional republic. I've heard all the quotes from Thomas Jefferson, all that shit. I don't need to hear it. The U.S. is a democracy. Anyway, but the reason they advocate a constitutional republic is because they are, guess what? Republicans. The alt-right was and I say was because it essentially disbanded after 2017 and the Charlottesville riots. But the alt-right was a reactionary movement that rejected all forms of modernity. Its worldview was rooted in people like Oswald Spengler and Julian Evola. Is it Julian or Julius Evola? I just know it's Evola. But anyway, Spengler and Evola and people like that. It has no connection to the modern day GOP, save for the fact that they did think that Donald Trump would bring about eventually bring about the country and the worldview that they wanted to, the world they wanted to inhabit and embody and all of that. But as far as an actual support for the United States, the U.S. Constitution, or having a position on the Constitution, their only position was to burn it all to the ground and start over with their royalist monarchist utopia that they wanted to found on ethno-nationalism and all that. That's the alt-right. The alt-right, as far as a major threat, essentially packed up and went home after the Charlottesville riots. After that, after the FBI started cracking down on them, the actual alt-right basically packed up and went home. You still see Richard Spencer popping up on various right-wing podcasts and that sort of thing. But the movement as a whole has essentially shit the bed and is essentially defanged, along with all of the so-called alt-light people like Stefan Molyneux and Gavin McInnes, that, yeah, they still have their little followings here and there, but they're not really major players or significant public pundits or anything like that anymore. They had their little moment and went home. Now, a lot of people want to say that the January 6th rioters were alt-right, and for all I know, there may have been some in that, and I'm certainly not doubting that there probably were in a group that large. But the J6 rioters were born more out of the QAnon movement, which is, yes, it's batshit crazy and ridiculous, but it's a specific kind of batshit crazy and ridiculous. The QAnon movement attracted people that were more extreme constitutionalists. They were far right, but they had a far right interpretation of and adherence to the U.S. Constitution. A great example of that would be the Oath Keepers, who played a role. The group, the Oath Keepers, who played a role in the January 6th riots. The reason I know who the Oath Keepers are is because one of their founders is John Schaefer, the guitarist and principal songwriter for Iced Earth. And, I don't agree with the man's political opinions, but fuck, Iced Earth is an amazing band. Anyway, so that all of that is more what the J6 rioters were focused on. Now, Trump was very adept, or I wouldn't even say adept, he just kind of naturally magnetized all of these various far-right factions. But it's important, as well as the mainstream of conservatism, but it's important to understand that there are critical differences between these groups. Coming back to Mark Driscoll, for example, mean-spirited, fire-breathing evangelical church pastors have been a staple of the GOP since time immemorial. Since the coining of the term, there have been extreme televangelists and that sort of thing that have supported right-wing conservative Republican causes. It is by and large a conservative movement. It exploded. It began again in popularity, or it emerged under Nixon. It exploded in popularity throughout the 1980s under Ronald Reagan, to such a degree that, as vile as some of their points of view are, I'm sorry, but as I can't help but feel warm waves of nostalgia when I see out of focus VHS footage of some pastor screaming for donations with a 1-800 number scrolling at the bottom of the screen, and CCR music, contemporary Christian rock music, playing in the background and all of that. It's just so nostalgic for me, the same way like 80s cartoon intros are nostalgic for me, and they would be on at the same time of day. But anyway, so that's a long-standing tradition in the evangelical Christian church, and Mark Driscoll is only the latest manifestation of it. The alt-right is so far to the right of the GOP that they're practically vanishing on the horizon. I mean, let's think about this. You can think about degrees of right-wing behavior. You can really, if you break it down, you can put it in a very easy sort of time, not a timeline, but an easy spectrum. If you think about it, right, in the just to the right of the middle, you have your moderate conservatives, the Hank Hills of the world. Maybe they have, some kind of traditional views that seem a little hokey and outdated and weird by modern standards, but we all agree that they're solid, decent people that you can rely on. They're good-hearted people. They're kind-hearted people, the Hank Hills of the world. And you don't want to lose the Hank Hills of the world, because, think about it. Do you want Hank right here in the middle, right here just to the right of the middle, rather? Or do you want him feeling like the only place he's got to go is the far right? Where do you want him? Where do you want Hank Hill? Because, we all love Hank Hill. We all think Hank Hill is great, and there are real people out there that have that kind of moderate conservative position. We don't want to lose those guys. They're good-hearted, decent people. To the right of Hank Hill, we start getting into the Fox conservatives. These are the Fox News conservatives. These are the people that really came into the fore, really found their stride under Bush 2. 9/11, 9/11, Say You Love America or Shut Up, Bill O'Reilly, Sean Hannity conservatives. They are more socially conservative, and they're socially conservative and business conservative, but they don't really offer anything that unusual from the mainstream of conservative thought. To the right of that is indeed where you will find your Daily Wire type people. This is where you'll find the Matt Walsh's, Michael Knowles, Ben Shapiro type people. They are a little to the right of Fox News in that they have, I think, a larger utopian vision. Fox News is just conservatism, advocacy of conservative policy talking points in general, whereas Daily Wire has kind of an overarching worldview that they want to bring about. You could say they have a larger, more organized social planner vision for what they want to bring about. And so, because of that, in any push from to the right to the left, you tend to find authoritarians more on the outer reaches. So the more we push towards social planning, the further in either direction they go. After that, you find the people that were the, if you will, enablers of the alt-right, the early enablers of the alt-right that brought it into prominence during Trump's first election cycle. This is where you get into your Breitbart, Milo Yiannopoulos, Steve Bannon, that sort of thing. These people will make some perfunctory claims that they are in fact occupying some kind of libertarian opposition to the far left, and that they are still fundamentally respecters of personal liberty and personal freedom, that a certain live and let live ethos, they will advocate a certain live and let live ethos, but they still are not quite as extreme as what comes next. What comes next is the alt-light. This is essentially the alt-right with a nice hat, the alt-right with a nice makeup job. This is Stefan Molyneux, Gavin McInnes, that kind of thing. The people who take the ideas of the alt-right and try to put them in a sort of bright and cheerful, give them kind of a bright and cheerful face that we can all get behind, but it's still fundamentally the alt-right. And finally, at the far end, you've got the alt-right. And by the way, the constitutionalists that I mentioned would probably fall more between the Daily Wire people and the Daily Wire people and the Breitbart people, somewhere in there. Maybe closer to the Breitbart people. But then all the way out here, you have the alt-right. And the defining thing, the reason I would put it all the way out there, is because throughout, from the center all the way out until we start getting into alt-light territory, all of these people have still espoused a fundamental appreciation for the U.S. Constitution, U.S. values, and the U.S. way, the United States way of life. When you get out into the alt-right, they maintain that any adherence to these modernist constructs is to be considered, is to be opposed and to be considered, modern depravity and modern degradation and that sort of thing. And that gets into the influence of Spangler and that sort of thing. And I could carry it out this way on the left too, but we're talking about the right wing. So anyway, when we bring it back around, talking about Mark Driscoll, if you think Mark Driscoll is bad, go look up Rod Parsley. Rod, R-O-D, Parsley, like the garnish. Rod Parsley. Look this guy up. He's one of the ones that comes up if you see those video reels where they have evangelical church pastors screaming and putting death metal behind it. He's one of the ones that gets used in that a lot. And he really, he seriously would have, if he had gone a different road in life, he would have been a great vocalist for a Cannibal Corpse or an Obituary or a, any of the great death and grind bands out there and everything. But he is a fire-breathing, mean-spirited asshole, and just a utterly revolting human being. And he is quite honestly, it's like he's not just Mark Driscoll, he's Mark Driscoll plus Vince McMahon. I mean, it's just ungodly, and I use the word quite directly, ungodly, what he is like, who he is and what he's like. It's revolting, and his ideas, his beliefs are revolting. There's one, I use this because it was the most recent thing of his I ever watched. Just I was curious to see if he was still doing his thing. He was big all the way back in the 90s and before and everything like that. Anyway, I looked it up, and it was him talking about the movie The Dark Knight Rises. And he gets up there, he has that look like so many of the evangelical church leaders where, he looks like a St. Bernard that's just shaken off a lot of water, And he's like, it's talking about the shooting in Aurora, Colorado, where the shooting happened at the premiere of The Dark Knight. And he's talking about, these people were seeing The Dark Knight Rises. And we're supposed to, Mitzi says hi, and we're supposed to be surprised that there was a shooting at a movie called The Dark Knight Rises. And he literally is making the case that it's okay, The Dark Knight Rises. that sounds like something Satan, how a way Satan might be described. And these people went to a movie that has a title that sounds like a way Satan might be described. So they brought that shooting on themselves. Like, fuck that guy. I cannot, like I said, people like him have a certain nostalgic charm for me, but I cannot for the life of me fathom how you can have attitudes like that and call yourself a Christian. I honestly believe, I believe personally, if Jesus Christ had been in that movie theater and saw that guy coming with the gun to kill everybody, he would have walked up to the guy and calmed him and prayed with him and got him to leave peacefully and maybe convinced the guy to get some help, turn himself over to the authorities and get some help. That's what I think. That is what the Jesus that I worship would have done. I cannot fathom of a Jesus Christ that would watch all of these people getting mowed down and shot dead by a shooter and said, and turned to him and said, "Oh, you brought it on yourself for seeing a Satan movie." Yeah. So yeah, Rod Parsley, man, you can't even imagine. I remember seeing a thing back. This was back when I was in like junior high school, and flipping through Trinity. I think it was Trinity Broadcasting Network, one of the evangelical things. And he's sitting there. He's got his congregation flagellating themselves with bags of rocks. I mean, the guy is fucking insane. He's like the Russ McCamey of televangelism. Anyway, so I bring that up to say, you know, Mark Driscoll is disgusting. His belief system is not alt-right. And here's the thing. Here's why you have to hold that. You have to distinguish these different groups and know what they are. Because eventually, and you're not going to like this, you on the left, but this is the truth. Eventually, you're going to have to reconcile with these people. See, the thing is, these glasses, I know I keep saying this, these glasses are just for color filtering, or filtering blue light when I'm staring at the screens. They don't correct my vision, but anyway, they are great for dramatic flourish, you know. Wasn't it you on the night of December 15th? Anyway, but the thing is, you're going to have to eventually reconcile with these people, because if you don't, the GOP, the Republicans, the conservatives, they're going to keep running worse and worse, more vile, more heinous candidates. Donald Trump is a human being only at the biological level. Do you and everyone on the left shares my revulsion in looking at Donald Trump, at everything that he is? Now remember a time about 20 years ago, a little over 20 years ago now, a time when we all thought that it couldn't possibly get worse than George W. Bush. How bad is Donald Trump? George W. Bush and Dick Cheney are against him. That's how far afield he is. And the sad thing is, Hank Hill, that guy, that honest, sincere, decent guy we all like, that's just a little to the right of the mainstream, just a little bit over here, is put in a position where that's all he's got. That's what he's got to vote for. Hank Hill would not need to vote for someone like Donald Trump. Yes, Hank Hill would get excited about someone like Bush, but he doesn't need somebody as far to the right as Donald Trump. But time and again, these people feel like they've been pushed. I swear to you, Mitzi has been fed today. I don't know what she's after. Anyway, time and again, what happens is the left wins, and they act like the sorest winners on the planet. Look at the history of the conservative movement in the United States. Richard Nixon wins re-election, getting, I believe, all but one state. He was overwhelmingly popular. And then he got booted out because of Watergate. That was a big, big, big smack in the face for a lot of GOP Republicans, especially because all throughout the 1960s, increasingly throughout the 1960s, the left had won the culture war with the Summer of Love. Then Richard Nixon, who was brought on to be kind of the adult in the room and correct all of the Summer of Love madness. I've heard the 70s described accurately as the hangover from the party era of the 60s, the hangover from the 60s. But anyway, Richard Nixon, who was brought in to be the grown-up in the room, gets ousted. Major smack in the face. Jimmy Carter comes along, and he is a lame duck Democrat. One term, and then we get Ronald Reagan, again, extraordinarily popular, creates the semblance of economic prosperity, but ultimately it was just a giant bubble, and he cut a lot of the social programs that actually were beneficial and helpful to people, even if government was probably not the most efficient or cost-effective way to fund them. So things like the mental health, mental health care, and not insane asylums, but mental institutes, places to put people who were out of control, mentally ill. All of those so-called crazy homeless people you see running around now, the people talking to themselves and randomly attacking people, that's all courtesy of Ronald Reagan. He decided we weren't going to pay for that anymore, and he dumped a whole bunch of people out on the street. Anyway, so Reagan wins the Miss Congeniality, but everybody loves him as a persona, and yes, he was definitely charming and did a good job with that, what we would think of as kind of setting the national mood of the country, and that's a contribution not to be understated. But ultimately, he doesn't really pay off the way they want him to. The GOP will still hold him up as, second only to Jesus Christ himself. Bush 1 comes along, and he is a hilarious, pathetic, lame duck, essentially the conservative answer to Jimmy Carter. Bill Clinton comes along, and Bill Clinton really pisses off the conservatives. He pisses off the conservatives so much because even though Clinton would be considered moderate by today's standards, he represents this wild, crazy, sort of rock and roll party lifestyle that they despise. He endears himself to the youth by playing the saxophone on Arsenio Hall in a way that George W. Bush could not possibly do, and he gets out this new vibe. Everybody is psyched and excited for Bill Clinton, and on top of that, Clinton is an excellent orator, so he is infinitely better than Bush 1, and takes over that torch from Ronald Reagan. So he then goes on to preside over the longest period of economic growth in U.S. history. Everybody falls in love with Bill Clinton, and they're super excited. The GOP, realizing that the mainstream media is looking for another another ratings boon like the OJ trial, goes great guns on the whole Monica Lewinsky, Linda Tripp, Paula Jones thing with Clinton. And as Homer Simpson put it, it looks like there's two sides to Bill Clinton: the side everybody else knows, and the side only I know about, the dark, depraved sex pervert. But anyway, yes, so they get going great guns on that and get Bill Clinton impeached, and he proceeds to not get voted out of office. The conservatives keep thinking they're going to have their righteous day of victory, and they get blue-balled over and over and over again. Then they get George W. Bush, and they put George W. Bush in literally because he's an idiot. They love the fact that he's an idiot, that he is a frat boy, dumbass, douchebag, goofball, that just, the president everybody wanted to have a beer with, even though I don't need to have a beer with my president. I need him to be able to handle major policy issues. But anyway, so they put George W. Bush in, and they put him in because they think his stupidity and his dumb attitude is refreshing and a refreshing change of pace. Bush is on track to be a yet another lame duck president in the vein of his father. And then what happens? Boom, 9/11. And they finally think they're going to get to have their super patriotic America return to good old traditional values, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Bush is going to be the shining light and this shining beacon on a hill and all of that. And he proceeds to be anything but. He spends the next 8 years bungling everything to do with 9/11 foreign policy, bungling everything to do, or foreign policy extending from 9/11, bungling everything else. And with the exception of a few minor things that I appreciated, like the signing into law the National Don't Call list, he is by and large not just a lame duck, but a massive, overblown dumpster fire of a president. That again, people left that presidency thinking, well, gosh, it can't get any, at least it can't get any worse than that. And even a lot of Republicans were like, well, gosh, I didn't vote for the guy. And so, you had all of those doubting Thomas, or no, it's not Thomas, it's Peter that I should, as a Christian, I should know my disciples better, but the one that denies Jesus 3 times. Anyway, you have all of those people on the GOP side, and so in comes Barack Obama, who once again carries on that legacy of being a stunning orator with this shiny, perfect persona that inspires great hope and happiness and good cheer in the people. They vote him into office. And once again, the right does everything in their power to demonize the man, and nothing takes hold. So they decide they're going to give you, just like, George W. Bush was one big fuck you, they're going to give you another big fuck you. They're going to give you a fuck you with both hands this time and bring in Donald Trump. This is where these people have been. They have been for 50 years now, more than 50 years. They have been the butt of the joke. And don't get me wrong, a lot of it has been because they've been acting like a bunch of joke butts. But they've been the butts of the joke for a long, long time now. And the way they retaliate, from being constantly the butts of the joke, is by putting up these politicians that are not, but anyone can look at and tell these guys are not good politicians, but they make for great fuck yous. Even Ben Shapiro described Donald Trump as being not a real political candidate, but rather a giant orange middle finger to the left. And that's exactly what he was. Now I want you to stop and think about something. There was a time when we were thinking, God, at least it can't get worse than George W. Bush. Now we are in the position of thinking, God, at least it can't get worse than Donald Trump. Well, let me use my blue light filtering glasses to great effect. Yes, it can. It can continue to get worse than Donald Trump. It can go, you have, as bad as Trump is, you have no idea how bad it can get. It can get a whole fuck of a lot worse, especially as long as the right is goaded by the left into continuing this further progression into insane radicalism. I know it sounds paradoxical, but if you want to bring about the liberal and progressive values and social change that you want to bring about, what you need to instantiate is not extreme leftism. It's moderate liberalism. It's the liberal answer to Hank Hill, Tim Walz, basically. That's what you need. And that's, by the way, one of the reasons Tim Walz is so incredibly popular is because of that. That very reason. He's the left-wing version of Hank Hill. That's what you need. And you need somebody that actually is a uniter and not a divider. Because the only thing, the right cannot be indulged in their constant, their ongoing, manic, foaming, rabid, pursuit of the next most extreme, how bad can it possibly get candidate. They can never be indulged in that. But they can be reached. And the good news is there's a lot more Hank Hills in this country than there are Richard Spencers. So don't make Hank Hill feel like Richard Spencer is the only place he's got to go. You can alienate the extreme right by embracing the moderates, by welcoming them in, by saying, hey, we've got some policy positions we're not going to budge on, but we're open to dialogue with you. And maybe there will always be things we never fully agree on, but we can get 80% of the way there. And that's significant. Maybe we can just get 55% of the way there towards total agreement. But we got to get it further over that line, because we can't, as a country, we can't keep going on with this thing where every fucking election comes down to, this comes down to like 5 ballots in East Chitlin Switch, Arkansas. This thing of like, it comes down to the wire. In terms of victories, it should look more like when Richard Nixon won his second term, where one side is very clearly the overwhelming popular choice for the country. And that's not going to happen on the right. I don't think the right can self-correct at this point, but the conservatives can the liberals can actually rehabilitate the right. We can actually, close the Overton window to right about here instead of having it be way the fuck out here. We can get to a point where the left and the right can trust each other again, can work together. I don't want the national divorce, as they're talking about it, this great secession where the country's all split up along political lines. I don't want that. I mean, the states all split up along political affiliations. I don't want that. I really don't. But to avoid that, we have to understand what's actually going on over there. This is bringing it back around full circle to where we started. Calling someone like Mark Driscoll alt-right, calling someone like Ben Shapiro alt-right, this is a massive smack in the face to the Hank Hills of the world. This is, think about it this way. The left loves to talk about LGBT issues. So let's think about this. Calling the Hank Hills of the world alt-right is like calling Harvey Milk a bug chaser. Bug chasers, if you don't know, are the fraction of men within the LGBT community that intentionally have unprotected sex with HIV-positive partners in hopes of contracting the disease themselves. It is not, I say it's within that community because that's where it occurs, but it is not a part of LGBT culture. It is not it is not a sane or safe behavior by any means. It is a form of self-harm, and the people who engage in that really do need serious medical help. No, not to cure, or serious psychiatric help. No, not to cure them of being gay, certainly not, but to cure them of doing something so self-destructive and extreme, and recognize what their underlying issues and motives are for wanting to do that. But anyway, Harvey Milk, positive figure. At the risk of sounding grandiose, you could arguably say he was the Martin Luther King of the gay movement. And then, but then it's like you're saying, it would be like saying there's no difference between Harvey Milk and one of these extreme self-destructive maniacs that happens to be gay. That's the same thing with trying to say that these, while Mark Driscoll is not moderate, but that the people, trying to make relatively moderate forms of conservatism, calling them alt-right. Mark Driscoll is a vile human being, but as far as I know, he's not in the end. By the way, feel free to correct me if I'm missing anything here, but I've never heard him espouse anything related to white nationalism or neo-Nazism or anti-Semitism or anything like that. And the thing is, the Hank Hills of the world, might not, would not go right to listening to the Richard Spencers of the world. They don't like those guys initially, but they will initially listen to people like Mark Driscoll. So categorize Mark Driscoll correctly, for the good of the country, for the good of democracy, and for the good of both parties going forward. You people on both sides do, the conservative and liberal sides do represent different, not just different paths, different courses of action, but different, indeed, different types of people, different perspectives, different impulses, different attitudes, that kind of thing, ingrained personal attitudes and all of that. And, a lot of people on the right will say that, or I've heard people on the right say that it's like the conservatives are the lions and the conservatives are the lions and the liberals are the lambs, basically. Well, Jesus had a point in saying that the lions and the lambs will lie down together. And that's the point. That's what we're doing here. We don't have another unexplored continent to go colonize at this point, unless you want to massively invest in the future of Antarctic colonization or something. But we don't have anywhere else we can go. We don't have something like the Pilgrims leaving to go to the New World when people get tired of them. We have to learn to get along with each other. And that begins with being intellectually honest about where people are and what points of view they're advocating, even when you don't agree with them. Anyway, those are my thoughts.